Просто вся электростанция горить, продолжает взрываться. Это просто жесть. Только что был ще один прильот, я просто в максимальном. Это а там же народу. Это просто...
Generally speaking, as far as Russia's missile capabilities go, I think a lot of analysts were predicting that Russia is running out of missiles, specifically Iskander-M, Calibers, and so on. I think that we can safely say that it is not the case. More so, Russia has the ability to produce those missiles despite the sanctions. It's able to import the necessary components from Western countries in order to keep up the production of those missiles. And I think that they are playing now an integral part of Russia's air campaign, because this air campaign is a predecessor to what many expect to be a Russian offensive, be it spring or summer offensive, whichever way it turns out to be. But the aim here is to obliterate Ukrainian power grid and destroy any potential military capabilities, such as drone production sites, ammunition storages, and so on. So we have to kind of contextualize why Russia is doing what it's doing. Now, as far as those missiles veering off course and kind of entering the Polish territory, we had it several times, and there could be reasons for that. So the one thing that could happen is that the missile, especially if we're talking about cruise missiles, they have a degree of maneuverability in the sense that they are designed to evade air defenses. And if Russia is striking anywhere in the West, so Western Ukraine, like Lviv, and we have seen this before, then there is a possibility that these missiles might make a turn and avoid the Ukrainian air defenses stationed there entering the Polish territory. Now, what does it mean for NATO? Well, interestingly enough, that also means that Poland doesn't have any air defenses of its own on its border with Ukraine, because otherwise there is a probability that that missile could have been shot down by Polish air defenses. Or conversely, Poland doesn't want an escalation. And as has been stated before, Poland said, well, we saw that the missile wasn't actually targeting Poland, that it was en route to Ukraine. Therefore, we didn't do anything. And what can you do if you have a 40-second window, which was the last time a couple of weeks ago that this missile flew over Poland? What do you do in those 40 seconds? Because you cannot, somebody operating an air defense system, you cannot just shoot it down. You need an approval. And by the time you get that approval, the moment is gone. So that is another possibility. But what it shows is that on the NATO side, there is no, or at least on the Polish side, there is no readiness to enter in a direct conflict with Russia because of Ukraine. And all efforts are being made in order to avoid a potential misunderstanding with the Russians, as to avoid any escalation at this stage. And I think specifically for NATO, it has been recognized that NATO is not ready to wage a war right now. And specifically European members of the North Atlantic Alliance do not have the military capabilities right now. And as a Finnish president was stressing yesterday, Europe needs less belligerent towards Russia. Instead, it should be preparing for the worst, hoping it doesn't come. One thing we have to say about the Ukrainian power plants is that many of them have been built during the Soviet time, so they are very sturdy. And so the damage done can potentially be repaired, even if it takes time. The other problem is, from a Ukrainian perspective, where do you put your air defenses? There are reports in conjunction with what happened this morning that a German IRIS-T has also been destroyed. And so Ukraine is running out of air defense systems. That's one problem. So where do you put them? Do you put them around the capital? What do you protect with those air defense systems? That's one. The second one is, do you have enough missiles for those air defense systems? So we have seen that the Ukrainian forces had a few systems close to the line of contact. Then the Russians made sure that they are removed from there. And now Ukraine is desperately pleading the allies to supply it with more air defense systems. But the problem is the production of those air defense systems. You cannot just knock them out or transfer whatever you have in stock. An example of that being the Norwegian NASAMS, for instance. It takes about 2 years to produce a system like that. And it's not being produced in one location, in one factory. Radars, for instance, and missiles for it are being produced by RTX, formerly known as Raytheon. And other components are produced by other third parties. So you have a very long supply chain, which is right now very difficult to sustain because of all the disruptions globally, including what is happening with Houthis and in the Red Sea, which makes it more difficult to keep the timelines. And so even if the allies pledge air defenses to Ukraine, they will not arrive on time, or they cannot arrive on time because you simply cannot make them fast enough. And so you have the situation where your back is against the wall, you don't have enough air defense systems, and how else do you want to protect your critical infrastructure? So I see it as a very difficult situation where the military command, together with a political counterpart, will have to make the decisions where to locate the remaining air defense systems that Kyiv has, and potentially shoot down only something that might actually lead to critical damage, rather than shooting down 50 drones and then letting 3 missiles go through. It's difficult to know what exactly happened. The Russians are claiming that the Ukrainian side has been responsible for this attack. The Ukrainian side says that the Russians have done it in order to trigger another Chernobyl-like catastrophe, so endangering civilians, not just the supply of power. I think since the Russians are controlling it, for them, it wouldn't be very wise to do anything. I don't know if Ukraine did it. I don't have any evidence either way. I'm just thinking logically here. But what is interesting is both appealed to the International Atomic Energy Agency to comment on the situation. And the comment was that there is no threat as of now, which in itself I found interesting. So it's difficult to see what exactly happened, and whichever side wanted to provoke some sort of catastrophe clearly failed, or maybe Rafael Grossi is understating the situation in Zaporizhzhia. So there is very little clarity on what the purpose of that was, and why are we hearing the statement that we shouldn't be worried about that. If it leads to a Chernobyl-like explosion, certainly it would have a devastating impact, not just on Ukraine, but also on, from a Russian perspective, on the Russian-controlled Ukrainian territories. So I don't think that either side would directly benefit from its explosion, aside from pushing the blame on the other party and saying, well, the Russians did it, therefore they are genocidal because they will be killing their own population alongside with that population in the Donbass, or the other way around. So only from that perspective, in the informational sphere, kind of to dehumanize your adversary, it would be an advantage. But that being said, I don't think that it's the best means to get there. I think there are other ways to dehumanize your adversary without creating a nuclear catastrophe, because that will essentially affect Ukraine. It will affect Russia, but it will also affect surrounding countries. So the effects of an explosion like that will be far-reaching. If we recall Chernobyl, Europe was worried about it. European countries were worried about the nuclear fallout from that catastrophe. Therefore, I think while Zaporizhzhia is not that far west, you could argue, but still there is this danger. So I think from that perspective, it's not an ideal target to play with. I do recall when the Russians were kind of pulling their artillery in the vicinity of the nuclear power plant and were claiming the Ukrainians are shooting and essentially endangering the situation. But right now, I don't see why either side would try to do anything.